Ho! Welcome to another episode of The Growth Compass. Shout out to our sponsor, as always, senders.co. If you'd like to do cold email outreach, check your deliverability. I'm sure you know about that. But hit me up if you'd like to be introduced. They help you do it correctly. And because of that, the opportunity to interview people like Arvind today on the show. Arvind, what's going on?
Hey Blake, it's good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, this is so cool. I can't wait. I would love to give an introduction, but I'm sure you'd be able to give context into what you're building and who you are better than I could. So why don't you go ahead and do that, and then we'll get into all the interesting things you're doing.
Yeah, my name is Arvind. I am the co-founder and CEO here at Fresco AI. We are an AI document manager for construction companies, general contractors. We help them to create site notes about what's happening on site and make sense of the many thousands of documents that are generated over the lifetime of a construction project much more easily than they currently are able to.
Awesome. Can you give a short introduction of how you got to where you are?
Yeah, for sure. I kind of took the long and winding road to where I'm at right now. I came out of college kind of on a scientific track. My first job out of school was as a scientist. I was pre-med, but I ended up starting a different company that did pretty well. And when I sold that company, I ended up moving more full-time into the world of tech. And so I spent some time working in venture capital. I was a product manager for a little while and then spent the last 2 years as chief of staff and head of sales at more mature kind of Series B-ish AI company called January AI here in the Bay Area. The longer term goal though was always to start another company. And I was looking at the new trends in AI, all of the enablements that this new technology afforded, and I got really excited about leveraging this technology to start something. And so my co-founder Akil and I, we started Fresco about a year ago, and we got into Y Combinator's fall 2024 batch and have been building the company full time since September.
Sick. Well, I do see, and you did just mention, so you're out on the West Coast right now.
That's right, yeah.
Are you originally from the area, or did you end up out there
I'm
for one of those
actually originally
jobs?
from Minnesota, but I came
Where?
to California right after college. I'm from a town called Edina. It's about 15 minutes outside of Minneapolis.
Cool. Yeah, I know a lot of great people. Approximately half of my family are from Minnesota.
Okay, where are they from?
Northwestern part, like
Okay,
20 minutes from
gotcha.
Kansas, but
Got it.
wonderful
Okay,
people, so
very
that
cool.
doesn't surprise me. So if you
Yeah.
have, let's see, I think, a lot of what I'm interested in and what I'm excited about is what you're building right now. And something that I like to do with people who have interest in complex stories like you do is just get a sense of who you were at the point you decided to become a full-time entrepreneur and how your experiences prepared you for that. So, and you've done some really cool things. You said you even started a business prior and successfully exited it, worked at a mature AI startup in sales and things like that. So if you could pick two of your experiences and describe how they contribute to you being in a place in life where you said, you know what, I'm jumping all the way in to another venture. That'd be awesome. So yeah, just two of your experiences.
Yeah, great question. I think two of my experiences. First was the company that I talked about. It was called Rally. We also were known as Down Ballot Solutions. And the second experience was probably the time I spent as chief of staff at January AI. Um, I'll talk about Rally first.
Do it.
So basically, I graduated college in 2020. I was pre-med in college. I had kind of taken the MCAT. I was all set up to go to medical school. I didn't want to start during the pandemic year. I wanted my first year to be in person. And so I ended up taking a gap year to work as a scientist, to get my master's degree. And I had a bunch of free time. And so I had taken a class in college by this very illustrious professor at Brown named Barrett Hazeltine. It was all about entrepreneurship, and that was always something that had appealed to me. It's kind of a maybe one day I could do something with it. But I had all this time, and I figured, if I wanted to test whether or not I actually had what it took to be an entrepreneur, like this was a really good time to run that experiment because I had virtually no risk. And so 2020 was an election year, and I won't go into like specifically what we did unless you're interested. But basically, we made a political technology company that ended up doing very well. Like we found a real problem to solve. We niched down and solved it really well for a group of customers who got really
What was
passionate
it?
about us. Yeah, so basically, what we did was we made it a lot cheaper and easier for people to run for local office. So think like city council, school board, than it currently is. And right now it costs like $75,000 to um, run for local office. Uh, that seems really high when it should be like teachers and firemen who are on the school board or town
Yeah.
council, and they're priced out of elections unless they like court these high value donors.
Interesting.
The reason is because elections at the state level and higher are underpinned by this very powerful software like NGP Van for the Democrats, and there's kind of a few other competitors. They require you to be like kind of politically plugged in, and a lot of these local races are nonpartisan. And so this isn't where we started, but eventually what we built was kind of a very stripped down version of NGP Van, which is this campaign organizing software for local politicians. And we slashed the cost of running a local campaign from $1,000 to $8,000 to $10,000, which was a lot more palatable. We ran almost 100 races. We won most of our races, and what's more, most of our candidates had never run for political office before. And so that
This
was
is
a really cool
unreal.
experience. Yeah, man, it was really awesome. And I think the thing that I learned there was this was a company that I had started from my bedroom. I got to work with some of my best friends. I got to solve like a new problem every single day for people who were really passionate about the solution that I was building. And I thought like, man, it just does not get better than this. Like, this is what I want to do. And so I ended up deciding not to be a scientist anymore. I'm deciding to kind of forego the medical school path. And I came to San Francisco for a job in venture capital, where I think the idea was that I would kind of get my hands dirty, like learning about the broader world of investing in startups. And when I was in VC, I decided to kind of be more operational, because it occurred to me that a lot of the more substantial learning about how to build a startup wouldn't necessarily come from investing in startups, but working in startups. And eventually that led me to the second experience I had, which was the chief of staff at a company called January AI.
Yeah. So, man, this is dangerous. I have so many questions about
Yeah,
Rally and how you grew that. So I'll indulge in one, and then we'll move on to
yeah,
that
for
second
sure.
experience. And I'm just curious. So end to end, how long did you work on that company?
So Rally end to end was like 18 months.
18 months. Oh my god, that sounds like more than a sprint. Like a
Yeah,
maximum sprint. So did you do any type of outreach, or was growth typically inbound?
we did a lot of outbound growth. I mean, basically, the way that we started was we made it really easy for politicians to identify who was in their district and who is, I guess, a likely voter for them. The cool thing with Rally is, and the way we started was, I guess we pivoted into this, but it was campaigns had like no idea who was even in their district to vote for them, because all of the data about the various voters who are registered is owned by the Secretary of State. This data is like, it's free. So like the Secretary of State, I mean, like not like the U.S. Secretary of State.
Yeah, yeah.
Minnesota has a Secretary of State, or
Yeah,
like
I'm
Iowa
familiar. I'm
does,
familiar.
right? This data is like technically free for anyone to access, but it's kept in like a really complicated like CSV file that, unless you're like tech savvy, you have no idea how to read it. And it's not formatted well. It's not super useful. And so a lot of these
Wow.
people running for office were like in their 40s, 50s, 60s. They had no idea how to like read these files. And so what we did was we took this free data. We worked out a program to essentially format it so it became useful. And then we sold the free data just formatted nicely to campaigns initially. And that's kind of how we got our start.
What an elegant solution. What was your main source of outreach? Was it cold email at the time? Was it calling? Was it going
Yeah, it
to
was a little
rallies?
bit of everything. Yeah, it was a little bit of everything. It was we did a lot of cold outreach via email. We did a lot of cold calling, which was definitely a really big learning curve, but a really valuable experience. And then eventually we got more inbounds. We
Sure.
kind of worked on referral. Like if you're running for city council in your town, like probably the town over your friends running for maybe school board, and so we got a lot of referral traffic that way too.
Cool. Well, we could do an entire conversation about that, and I would like to at some point. I do want you to quickly run through how your experience as chief of staff you feel like put you in a position to pursue the Fresco.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think with the chief of staff position, your mileage really varies. Like sometimes it can be you're basically like a glorified like executive assistant. Like sometimes you're I don't know, like
Right.
not really doing anything of value. I was really lucky because in my chief of staff role, it really was being a thought partner to the CEO, and everything the CEO did, I got to do too. And eventually I was like leading my own initiatives, and a year and I got promoted to being the head of sales for the whole company. I think that experience was really informative because it was basically an apprenticeship for being a CEO. Like you rode shotgun on all of their meetings. You preparing collateral for people. I got to really see what it was like to be a CEO, the kind of decisions you were making across, how to hire people. Like I had maybe before interviewed like 5 people for like really low stakes things, but at January I interviewed probably like dozens of people for tens of roles. I got to meet CEOs of these very large like multinational corporations and pitch to them like myself. And so I learned a lot from my boss, a woman named Nushina Shemi, she was previously a bigwig at Oracle. She led all of their US revenue. And so she was like probably like the best salesperson I've ever met. I learned a lot about how to do sales from her. And I think those experiences have been really instructive as we've built out Fresco.
So I think something, well, really quick, I guess if she's coming from Oracle, I have an assumption you guys were using Salesforce, maybe.
We were using Salesforce a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, that would be my guess. But I think it'd be really valuable then, before we really dive into what you're doing with Fresco, to especially, I mean, not only myself, but especially the audiences at such a high level of tech sales, not only, specific language, repping, cold calls, things like that, but more systemically, how you structure a sales program, the software, how you set goals, how you stay on top of those and stuff. What is your perspective now, given that experience, on how to, from start to finish, build a successful sales part of your growth engine?
Yeah. So you're speaking about like sales, like mechanistically,
Yeah,
or
I
is it
guess
like more process oriented about like
yeah,
what the sales cycle is?
yeah. So how long were you at that company?
I was there for 2 years.
2 years. So I guess what I'm curious about you speaking on is, from when you got there uh, to when you left, how did your guys' sales cycle change? How did your approach to sales, to outbound sales, change? Yeah.
Yeah, good question. I think our approach to sales, and I was specifically, January had like consumer component. I was specifically doing like B2B sales. I think our approach to sales, like it didn't really change that much while I was there, mostly because we had a pretty good like sales like process. I think my biggest sort of learning about sales is that people buy from people. So it's about getting in front of the right person at the right time, quickly evaluating, how your solution could be of value to them and kind of moving them through the funnel that way. I think one of the most instructive things Nushin, my boss, told me was that uh, it's not on your customer to like have the idea of like how to use you. Like you have to give them the idea of how to use you. And so I think we got really good at kind of sitting in the customer's shoes, figuring out like what value they could gain from our software, and then pitching it to them that way.
What was your guy? What stack were you guys using at the time?
At the time, we were using Salesforce for, I guess, CRM. We were using Apollo for kind of sourcing. We were using like Instantly and SmartLead for like inbox warming and outreach. And then we used, I forget the name, but I think it was Trellis for a bit of cold calling as well.
Cool. Well, this is awesome. I mean, again, I think another entire episode we can go into about, at such a high level, with people that are so informed about what high level sales looks like. Your approach, how you go about it, how you structure it. I think that's really
For
valuable
sure.
information. So, but I do want to leave space for you to elaborate on what you're talking about now. How would you describe where you guys are at with Fresco at the moment?
Yeah, so we're a seed stage company. We are right now working with some of the largest general contractors in the country. I guess refining the solution that we have, but seeing really promising initial traction.
So, so when you're thinking about the aspect of growth, were these partnerships to establish, like you're saying, to further refine your product, or what did you perform, like typical sales outreach and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both. I think all of our sales has been basically outbound to these larger organizations. When you're doing B2B sales, the sales cycle is a lot longer. We basically initially targeted like very, very large general contractors doing $1 billion or more in annual revenue. And when you're looking at kind of hooking one of those whales, so to speak, like, it's not like a one and done sales cycle where you're looking for like $100 contract like an individual consumer. Like this is a probably in its eventuality like a multi-million-dollar contract over a number of years, and they don't just give that to you. So the sales cycle is more protracted. There's a lot more requirements you have to go through, and so the sales cycle can be a process of months as opposed to a process of like hours or days, as it is when you're selling like consumer software, for example.
How is it that you guys came to the conclusion to target the biggest players first? versus, because people in or companies in that industry vary, like any sized company that you could think of. So
Yeah,
yeah, how did you arrive at that conclusion?
it's a good question. I think part of it was that my background had been in B2B sales. Like I'd been selling to some of the largest corporations like in the world and certainly within the health tech space. And so I think like possessing that skill set, it made sense to focus on the analogous players in the construction industry. The other part of it was that, yes, there are a lot of, I guess, requirements when you're selling into like larger companies, but the juice really becomes worth the squeeze when you consider the magnitude of those contracts. And then finally, I think construction is really interesting because it's one of those industries where if you're a general contractor, you look across the street and you see what stack the firm across the street is using, and it's much easier to win the long tail of smaller firms by targeting the larger firms first than vice versa, where people from larger firms kind of set the pace for what the rest of the industry does. If Suffolk is using someone, a smaller firm is more likely to use you, as opposed to like if 10 smaller firms are using you, it doesn't necessarily become more likely that like one of the big guys takes notice.
How long did it take? So I guess I'll ask it in this way. What was your level of familiarity with this market when you started the company?
Yeah, I mean, I'd done a lot of reading. I never like worked in construction before. I think that was uh, I think that was kind of maybe a blessing, honestly. Like, I think it allowed us to think about problems within the industry through like an entirely new lens. And, it's really cool because a lot of the software that works in the construction industry works according to the way that things have, quote, like always been done. And we're doing things both anchored on current workflows, but also thinking about things slightly differently. And that's led to a lot of the success that we've seen.
Did you are you guys, while you are working on these relationships with the larger firms, are you simultaneously doing outreach at the moment?
Yeah, that's right. We are. Uh,
So based on your understanding of this market, what strategies are you guys engaging in?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of cold outbound. We did a lot of cold email, cold calling. Like we still do cold calling. Like I personally carve out a couple days a week just to do cold calls, like wall to wall
Days?
days. Yeah,
Good for
um,
you.
yeah. It's a grind, but it's a fun challenge, I think. And we get a lot of like referral traffic as well, or that's kind of the most effective channel for us. Is if someone likes us, like they will tell their friend, and it's more likely to stick that way. Um, so we're kind of like operating across like a multi-channel flow, but I would say there are certain channels that are more effective for us than others.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really awesome the stage that you guys are in and the opportunity it seems like you have. So there's just a lot of different things that we could touch on. I am curious from the perspective of somebody that is, so one of the focuses of this podcast is to discuss how different people come up with an idea and then bring it to the world very generally. So there's a lot of different ways you could do that through a company like you're building, a nonprofit, an initiative, government initiative, whatever it is. And it just seems like from not only your first experience with Rally, but this experience also, you are operating within some kind of system. I don't know how repeatable the this process with Fresco has been related to Rally, but if you could speak, if you were speaking to somebody that was starting at zero, had an idea. I think there's so much language around just whatever, validate, go, do this. What would you say to somebody that is just starting out with an idea, as far as how to take the next step forward tomorrow and what they should be focusing on for the next 3 months or something like that?
Yeah, I would say put it in someone's hands as quickly as possible. Get them to pay for it as quickly as possible. I think that validates your idea. Like eventually, the goal of any company is to make a product that people like and then people will pay for, right? And I think that the ability to test that hypothesis quickly will save you a lot of heartbreak if you spend a lot of time developing a product that eventually no one wants. And so make them pay you something, even if it's $1. Because I think that a lot of people can be very nice to you and say they like your product until you get them to pull out their wallets. Like there really is no proof around that. So I would say just like don't be precious about your ideas. Don't spend forever building something. Like as soon as you can, like get something minimal out there that still solves a problem into the hands of your customers, get them to use it, get them to give you feedback on it, what's good, what's working, what's not working, and continue to iterate that way. But I would say give it to people, make them pay, the sooner the better.
So I think I'll just speak personally. There was a project, I guess I wouldn't even really call it a company, but it was a software for helping people better find jobs. And we developed, like, this is a couple of years ago, so we really didn't know what we were doing, but we developed a whole front end, some back end components, and then tried to outreach, get people to use it. No one, not getting anyone to pay for it, but then do customer interviews and things like this. And it just got really complicated. So I'm curious, when you say get something into someone's hands, are you guys primarily software?
Primarily software, yeah.
Okay, so when you're trying to address the tension between something good enough for somebody to use, and then once they're using it, get honest feedback from them, how did you guys navigate that? And I guess currently, how are you navigating?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we give it to people, we see how they use it. Like people can say nice things to you. We will look at usage data like on our end, and those numbers don't lie. Like if someone says they like your product, but they only like open it like once a month, like they probably don't like your product. So we're pretty honest with ourselves about what's working, what's not working. And I think like just to kind of go off on what you said, like I think if someone is willing to tolerate like a very bad version of your product but still uses it, like that's a really good sign that you're solving a problem for them. And so I would say like again, the earlier you can get something like minimal out to someone and the quicker you can like abandon those ideas that aren't working, I think the more successful you can be.
So what was your version of that? What was your most minimal version?
Yeah, I mean, I think like initially, like, I mean, right now Fresco is like an app. It's like pretty polished. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff we can do. Initially, like, we were running like a web app. Like, you could only open it like in Safari. We didn't like have any like authorizations or like we didn't have like all like the single sign-on stuff that we have right now. Like, the camera permissions were a little like kinky. We didn't do like any like location analysis. Yeah, it was like complete. It was honestly pretty minimal.
Cool. And then again, I think just because, at least for me, in the conversations I've had, it becomes decently confusing when you're interviewing people and getting feedback. How are you doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we try to ask like pretty open-ended questions. Like, we don't want to lead customers into giving us a specific answer.
Is this an in-person interaction?
Usually in person, yeah. I mean, we are lucky enough that we work on a few sites here in San Francisco, and so the superintendents and users there are pretty nice about like having us on site, like getting feedback from them. And it's just like it's nice to like follow people around and see how they use the product like physically. Um, so honestly, what we do is we just like ask people to shadow them while they use the product. And then if we have questions about how they're using the product, like if something isn't working, like it's clear that it's not working, we'll ask them like what would make it better. But we try to be pretty user directed in how we gather feedback. I'd say like if you're looking to gather feedback from your customers, like there's nothing more valuable than just like sitting next to them while they do the work and then seeing how they use the product and kind of double clicking on stuff that is or isn't working.
Well, it's so sad, man. When there's so much left, I feel like, that you have to discuss, and I want to be respectful of the time that we have carved out. I have two of my favorite questions left, but I just want to say it's
Yeah.
pretty awesome, the experience that you've had and the things that you're speaking on. So it's
Thanks,
been
Blake.
really
I
dope.
appreciate it.
So my first of my final two questions is, at the moment with Fresco, where you guys are at, what would you say is the number one challenge you guys are navigating? And would you be able to frame it as an opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one challenge is it's just kind of like the trust building with our initial like early customers, like the initial early users, right? I think the big opportunity in construction right now is that it's probably the largest sector of the economy that tech hasn't like really touched in a profound way. It hasn't like infiltrated it as much as like other sectors like pharma or you know like education, etc. And that's because a lot of the workflows in construction are very manual because it's most convenient to be manual. And so the question we're trying to address is like, how do we make our product most valuable to users as light touch as possible? And that's something that we're still working our way through. But again, like seeing very promising initial results.
Is there anything from your, and this is, I guess, question one and a half, but is there anything from your personal experience as an entrepreneur that you would say is a challenge, reframed as an opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I wouldn't say this is like a challenge for me personally. Like it's something that I definitely like had to work to overcome. But I think as an entrepreneur, you kind of have to be a little bit of a masochist. I think like perversely, like I really enjoy getting rejected. like you said, I set aside a couple days a week just to do cold calls. Like I might make 100 calls and 10 people will pick up, and of those 10 people, like nine will tell me like to go take a hike. I think like weirdly enough, like when I hang up on one of those calls, like I feel strangely invigorated. That's not normal. I think I had to like be okay with getting rejected because it means that I'm on the right track. And I think as an entrepreneur, you kind of have to A, get used to the taste of blood in your mouth, and B, maybe even view it as a reward in its own right.
Wow. When I thank you for bringing that up. I think that is really an important concept. At what point do you feel like you developed that quality?
I'm not sure at what point. Like I guess
Okay.
it just like clicked. Like at some point, like it took a lot of reps. Like and honestly, like there are some days when like getting rejected it sucks, but I think if you can reframe it as like a challenge that you're overcoming, like if you're playing like a really hard like video game, there was an investor I met. He had a really interesting perspective on it, which is like startups are like a video game where as you level up, it just gets harder. But you have to like enjoy like the notion that hard things are worth doing because they're hard, and the harder something is, the more worthy it actually is of your precious time. I think if you can reframe it yourself that way, it can be a really helpful unlock.
Wow. Well, you're kind of you're slightly spoiling the next question because I'm already inspired. But the final one is it could be something small, it could be something large that's has been present in your life or headspace for a long time. But I'm curious what inspires you.
What inspires me? I think like I just feel like very like lucky and grateful to be in my position right now. Fresco is a problem that I'm really excited about solving. I get to work with one of my best friends like every day. I have the resources to do it. I have great investors and a really good support system. And I get to work on cool problems and do so on my own terms. And I think being able to execute against that opportunity is something that really is exciting every day. It's funny thinking about Fresco as a job. Like I technically get paid to do this, but it doesn't feel like a job. Like it feels like summer camp almost. And I think that if you're having fun, I think that's a sign that you're doing something right.
So I think something else I wonder about is that there seems to be people that come up with that happen to start businesses because they're personally somebody that they're then trying to help. Like for example, in your case, it would be if you were a soup and you were like, wow, here's this super manual process that technology could augment, but like you said, you didn't come from that background, and it would make sense if what fired you up was like, I was this person, I'm helping people that are like me, but um, if it still is construction, I mean, that's that is completely cool. Specifically, what about this journey, this problem, this whatever is it the prospect of the fact that there's a real opportunity, prospect of financial return, like you said, working, building yourself as a person, like any one of these things. I'm curious what it is for you about Fresco.
Yeah, I mean, I really like our customers. I genuinely like them a lot. Like I get to hang out with them and like solve their problems. And again, I think it's like a field where uh, there there really hasn't been a ton of innovation, like technically. And I think a lot of people, if you come at it with like a beginner's mindset and you're humble about the fact that like the people you're talking to, your customers, they're the experts and you're just there to serve them, I think people are a lot more receptive to you. And so I think that like what motivates me is just again all the things I said before, which I think entrepreneurship ultimately is about the ability to like live your life on your own terms. And I think solving a problem for people I genuinely enjoy is honestly like the greatest job in the world.
Well, sweet. This is super cool. I appreciate it. I'm excited for the next 7 episodes. But if there is anything, what's the best way if someone's interested in reaching you or finding out more that they can?
Yeah. You can, if you're interested in checking out Fresco, you can find us at fresco-ai.com. And there's a little portal there where you can book a time to meet with me. You can also find me on LinkedIn or at my personal website, veluvali.com.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for the conversation. This was so much fun. I'll see you next time.
Appreciate it, Blake. Thank you.
All right, Arvind. See you. Whoa.